The story of David and Goliath is one of the most well-known biblical narratives, found in 1 Samuel chapter 17. It serves as a powerful illustration of faith, courage, and divine intervention, encapsulating the victory of the underdog through God's assistance. Set against the backdrop of a prolonged conflict between the Israelites and the Philistines, the story unfolds in the Valley of Elah, highlighting the tensions and dramatic encounters between the two armies. During the reign of King Saul, the Israelites were engaged in a fierce war with the Philistines. The Philistines had assembled their forces at Soko in Judah, and the Israelites had camped in the Valley of Elah. The two armies faced each other on opposite hills, with the valley between them. This setting created a natural arena for the forthcoming events. The Philistine army had a secret weapon, Goliath of Gath. Goliath was a giant of a man, his height reaching over 9 feet. He wore a bronze helmet and a coat of scale armor weighing about 125 pounds. His legs were protected by bronze greaves, and he carried a bronze javelin on his back. The shaft of his spear was like a weaver's rod, and its iron point weighed 600 shekels. Goliath's size and armor made him an intimidating figure, and his challenge to the Israelite army was designed to exploit their fear. Goliath's challenge for 40 days. Goliath stepped forward every morning and evening to challenge the Israelites. He shouted across the valley, mocking them and their God. Goliath proposed a single combat scenario. If an Israelite could defeat him, the Philistines would become their servants. However, if Goliath prevailed, the Israelites would serve the Philistines. This challenge was a strategic psychological warfare, aimed at demoralizing the Israelites and asserting Philistine dominance without a full-scale battle. Despite Goliath's provocations, no Israelite soldier dared to face him. King Saul and his men were dismayed and terrified. The stakes were high, and the fear of defeat and subjugation paralyzed the Israelite camp. Enter David. David was the youngest son of Jesse of Bethlehem. Jesse had 8 sons, and David, the youngest, was a shepherd. His 3 eldest brothers, Eliab, Abinadab, and Shammah, were in Saul's army. David, too young to be a soldier, stayed back to tend his father's sheep. One day, Jesse sent David to the battlefield to deliver food to his brothers and bring back news of the war. David left his flock in the care of another shepherd and set out early in the morning. He reached the camp as the army was going out to its battle positions, shouting the war cry. Israel and the Philistines were drawing up their lines facing each other. David left his things with the keeper of supplies, ran to the battle lines, and asked his brothers how they were. As he was talking with them, Goliath, the Philistine champion from Gath, stepped out from his lines and shouted his usual defiance. David heard it and was struck by the sight of the giant and his bold challenge. David's response: the Israelites had been saying, "Do you see how this man keeps coming out? He comes out to defy Israel. The king will give great wealth to the man who kills him. He will also give him his daughter in marriage and will exempt his family from taxes in Israel." David asked the men standing near him, "What will be done for the man who kills this Philistine and removes this disgrace from Israel? Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" They repeated to him what they had been saying and told him about the reward. When Eliab, David's oldest brother, heard him speaking with the men, he burned with anger at him and asked, "Why have you come down here? And with whom did you leave those few sheep in the wilderness? I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. You came down only to watch the battle." He then turned away to someone else and brought up the same matter, and the men answered him as before. What David said was overheard and reported to Saul, and Saul sent for him. Before Saul, David said to Saul, "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him." Saul replied, "You are not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You are only a young man, and he has been a warrior from his youth." But David said to Saul, "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine." Saul said to David, "Go, and the Lord be with you." Preparing for battle, then Saul dressed David in his own tunic. He put a coat of armor on him and a bronze helmet on his head. David fastened on his sword over the tunic and tried walking around because he was not used to them. "I cannot go in these," he said to Saul, "because I am not used to them." So he took them off. Then he took his staff in his hand, chose 5 smooth stones from the stream, put them in the pouch of his shepherd's bag, and, with his sling in his hand, approached the Philistine. The battle meanwhile, the Philistine, with his shield-bearer in front of him, kept coming closer to David. He looked David over and saw that he was little more than a boy, glowing with health and handsome, and he despised him. He said to David, "Am I a dog, that you come at me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. "Come here," he said, "and I'll give your flesh to the birds and the wild animals." David said to the Philistine, "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin. But I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. This very day I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds and the wild animals. And the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's. And he will give all of you into our hands." As the Philistine moved closer to attack him, David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet him. Reaching into his bag and taking out a stone, he slung it and struck the Philistine on the forehead. The stone sank into his forehead, and he fell face down on the ground. So David triumphed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone. Without a sword in his hand, he struck down the Philistine and killed him. David ran and stood over him. He took hold of the Philistine's sword and drew it from the sheath. After he killed him, he cut off his head with the sword. When the Philistines saw that their hero was dead, they turned and ran. Then the men of Israel and Judah surged forward with a shout and pursued the Philistines to the entrance of Gath and to the gates of Ekron. Their dead were strewn along the Shaaraim road to Gath and Ekron. When the Israelites returned from chasing the Philistines, they plundered their camp. David took the Philistine's head and brought it to Jerusalem. He put the Philistines' weapons in his own tent. Aftermath and legacy. David's victory over Goliath was not just a triumph for the Israelite army but also marked the beginning of David's rise to prominence. King Saul took notice of David and brought him into his service, and David quickly became a favorite in Saul's court and among the people of Israel. Subscribe my YouTube channel. I hope you like this video. Thank you.